welcome to the stage Dr. Jayne Ifekwunigwe.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much to ECF for inviting me, and to the Hubs, and to Subtopia, and to all the idea makers for actually facilitating this opportunity as well with your incredible and inspirational ideas. I also wanted, since we are talking about commenting strategies, I also wanted to specifically thank three people. Nicola, if you're here, is Nicola here somewhere, who attended a public lecture I gave in Amsterdam in March and recommended me for this idea talk, so thank you to you. And thank you also to Vivian and Laura, with whom I had some very wonderful and organic Skype conversations over the summer, which inspired the paper that I wrote and actually made the paper very easy to write as a result of our conversations. So I'm just going to jump right in. The title of my paper, When Commenting Strategies Travel, Invisible Cities, Clandestine Migrations, and Mobile Commons. I'm going to start with an Igbo proverb. When a chicken arrives at a new dwelling place, it first stands on one leg and watches what other chickens do. It needs a hand to turn the forest into a dwelling place. Oral traditions such as storytelling are at the heart of most African cultures. In Things Fall Apart, the classic novel by the late Chinua Achebe, he observes, quote, "Among the Igbo, the art of conversation is regarded very highly, and proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten." End of quote. Beginning my talk with an Igbo proverb is a way to both pay homage to my ancestors and heritage, as well as to frame my critique of the commons as it pertains to clandestine migrations and invisible cities. This particular proverb speaks to African conceptions of the commons and what historian Peter Linebaugh refers to as commoning. We can build a shelter by ourselves, but we need more than two hands to make a home. As someone with firmly planted African roots, but whose branches have stretched to embrace Europe and North America, I find the critical engagement with the commons and commoning both fascinating and ironic. That is, those of us situated in the individual-oriented industrial global north have to learn the ways of commoning. We have become more connected in cyberspace, but we are increasingly disconnected from each other in non-virtual urban spaces. And I found particularly helpful when I was writing my talk, this new reader, hot off the press, Build the City. And I particularly loved one of the essays by Agnieszka Wisniewska, entitled Culture with People, Not Just for People. And she writes, quote, "I am writing this at my cousin's house. He has small children. In his backyard, there is a trampoline, a large one, fitted with a mesh enclosure for safety. I can see an identical one roughly a meter away in a neighbor's backyard, and another one a little farther off at the neighbor's neighbor's. Each child is jumping on its own trampoline. Will those children want to do anything together in the future? Why won't their parents get together and buy one trampoline for all of them to share? Would they be able to agree over whose backyard should have the trampoline and how to split responsibility of taking care of it between them? Or rather, no one would like to keep the trampoline in case a child should get hurt, and then whose fault would it be? This is the kind of society we are building. Lonely children on their trampolines, and only a few children at that. Most will only be able to watch from behind the fence." End quote. On the other hand, in the global south, collective action, cooperation, and community are still the glue binding cultures together. In spite of both the legacies of European colonization processes, as well as more recent globalization influences, the primacy of the extended family, the collective, and the community have survived. In kinship terms, we anthropologists refer to this as the privileging of consanguineal or blood relations over conjugal or marital ties. This notion of collectivity and commoning is even embedded in the translation of my Igbo surname. The literal translation of Ifekwunigwe is people in a multitude stand together. The anglicized version is strength in unity, united we are strong. In their book, Mobile Commons, Migrant Digitalities and the Rights to the City, Nikos Trimenikliousis, Dimitris Porsanoglu, and Vasilis Tsianos refer to the mobile commons as a useful way to describe the praxis of clandestine migration, the claiming of space, and the transitory making of home. Quote, "The mobile commons as such exist only to the extent that they are commonly produced by all the people in motion, who are the only ones who can expand its content and meaning. This content is neither private nor public, neither state-owned nor a part of civil society discourse. Rather, the mobile commons exist to the extent that the people use the trails, tracks, or rights and continue to generate new ones as they are on the move," end quote. However, I would sound a cautionary note. That is, we cannot assume that what the authors refer to as new socialities, new spatialities, and new citizenship modes are the organic product of the dynamic conditions of clandestine migration. Instead, I would argue that whether Sudanese, Eritrean, Ethiopian, Afghani, or Syrian, clandestine migrants' tendency towards cooperative and collective action, or the we, is an integral part of their cultures of origins, which is transported with them as they travel. Their monolithic rebranding as refugees and economic migrants defies this reality and erases any complex and diverse subjectivities prior to the migratory moment. In my talk, by focusing on the ways in which a multi-ethnic and transnational group of clandestine migrants build community in the liminal border space of the New Jungle in Calais, France, I will illustrate the dialectical tension between commoning strategies predicated on the transgression of physical, cultural, and ethnic borders with the boundary maintenance practices of the commons as exemplified by fences, surveillance, and policing. Untangling terminology. Before I begin, it is important for me to clarify certain terms and provide a broader framework for historical and contemporary migration processes. Refugee, economic refugee, asylum seeker, bogus asylum seeker, illegal migrant, irregular migrant, undocumented migrant, clandestine migrant. These are all confusing terms that circulate in media, academic, political, and popular discourses. This collision of terms stems from the fact that in the 21st century, if one is not a citizen of an EU country, it is extremely difficult to migrate anywhere in Europe. One must either meet the limited and stringent asylum criteria for refugee status outlined by the 1951 UN Convention, or have highly skilled labor to sell. However, the desire for freedom and a better life knows no boundaries, and those who cannot enter Europe legally will do so by any means necessary. For purposes of clarity, whether asylum seekers or illegal migrants, I refer to all migrants in transit as clandestine migrants, to signal the means by which they are trying to enter Europe, as well as their liminal status. Liminality is an anthropological term, coined initially by Arnold van Gennep and then expanded by Victor Turner to refer to the transitional phase between life stages. It has since been adapted by others, particularly urban geographers, to characterize communities and cities that are literally and figuratively in flux. For example, Antonio Nucia and Michael Lyons suggest, quote, "The temporariness and transitory character of the migrant's experience leads to the creation of liminal spaces, intimately associated with personal moments and movements of transformation, moments of discontinuity in social fabric, in social space, and in history. When people are in transition from one stage of life to another, this state of in-betweenness is particularly associated with recent migrants' experiences of rapid change," end quote. We can differentiate newer contemporary clandestine migrants from earlier migrants by their legal status as citizens. I refer to this older cohort as migrant settlers. Commoning strategies in the mobile commons in Calais, the New Jungle. Quote, "And then it becomes a full-size city, enclosed within the earlier city, a new city that forces its way ahead in the earlier city and presses it toward the outside," end quote. This quotation is from novelist Italo Calvino's masterful meditation on invisible cities and could very easily describe a microcosm of city dwelling that has developed on the outskirts of Calais. Sitting on 40 acres of land that was formerly reserved for a children's holiday camp, over 3,000 clandestine migrants have constructed a different kind of camp, which both residents and locals refer to as the New Jungle. Although its population is transitory, its fixtures are increasingly permanent. With assistance from local authorities, NGOs, and volunteers, residents have constructed makeshift shelters and attempted to recreate some of the comforts of home. In the New Jungle, one can find a library, 3 schools, a disco, several mosques, a church, an art gallery, a barber, 10 to 12 food outlets, shops, including a bicycle repair shop, as well as street lighting, wooden toilet blocks, water points, and a separate bricks and mortar shelter for women and children. Residents are also provided with 1 hot meal a day. For the lucky, the New Jungle is a transit zone. Their final desired destination is either the UK, which they hope to reach by jumping on a moving train or hiding in the back of a lorry, or France itself for those who are waiting to claim asylum. With stepped-up security and a new 13-foot-high barbed wire fence that has been built between the motorway and the New Jungle in order to prevent these attempts, many migrants remain stuck in this liminal space. The New Jungle is becoming Fortress Calais. The following film clip entitled Building a Community in Calais Jungle illustrates the ways in which this chaotic, precarious, and temporary controlled space has been transformed into a mobile commons, where the authors who coined the term argue the roughness of the street, the kind of micro-politics of encroachment of space, is turned into commons.
Right, it's time now for Focus, and today we have a special report from Calais, where a migrant camp dubbed the Jungle is becoming its own mini society. Home to an estimated 3,000 people, the Jungle has supermarkets, bars, a barber, and since Monday, a library. In a moment, I'll be speaking to one of the many volunteers trying to make life more bearable for the migrants. But first, this report by Lucy Proven and Haxi Mayers-Belkin, who were in Calais in the lead-up to the library opening.
Sunday morning in the jungle, while some do their washing, others attend mass. Migrants here are waiting for either escape or eviction. And while they wait, people are building shops, restaurants, and now, even art galleries.
You have to get in. Bon, ça c'est mon lit où je dors.
This is my bed. This is my living room.
Ça c'est
And these are the feathers that I use for my art.
Alpha left Mauritania 10 years ago and has been in the jungle for 8 months. He says he's been forced to make a home in a place he'd never have chosen. Art allows him to express his frustrations.
Bon, là c'est un oiseau qui cherche où refuser.
There's a bird. It's looking for refuge.
Où se réfugier. Il est toujours en train de.
It doesn't know where to fly.
J'ai pris cette image pour représenter.
It represents me and all refugees.
Tous les réfugiés qui sont là.
And here you see David Cameron, what he said about migrants. This is my response to that. This part is about those people who say they should send in the army to Calais. I say there won't be any war.
Alpha's not the only one bringing colour to the jungle. A deserter from Eritrea's indefinite mandatory national service, Razan helped build the jungle's first library.
If you have a habit of reading, books are exactly wonderful. Just reading books means to live inside them.
You have to come back after 3-4 days. And you will get me, I'm a librarian sitting on my chair, and I will show you where the book necessary for you.
Nana and her husband come to the camp most days, bringing a generator, a Wi-Fi router and speakers. A painter herself, she's launching a new project, Art in the Jungle, which aims to bring outside artists in.
Our aim is for them to come here, for them to do things with people living in the camp. We're also thinking about dance and singing. We really wanted to do something positive in this place that's just so dramatically sad.
Migrants here liken the camp to an open-air prison, fenced in, unable to claim asylum in Britain and denied shelter in France. The two countries have vowed to boost security and send more police. But as night falls, migrants continue to head out to the Eurotunnel, dreaming of England, but most will wake up once again in Calais' jungle.
Ben Okri, the Nigerian novelist, once said, quote, "The most authentic thing about us is our capacity to create, to overcome, to endure, to transform, to love, and to be greater than our suffering," end quote. In addition to food, shelter, freedom, and love, as humans, I too believe that we need to maintain a connection to the aesthetic to truly feel alive. Artists are both commentators on their societies and visionaries existing on a higher plane outside of societal constraints and norms. This duality is liberating and enables the creator to both provide a critique of the world they inhabit, as well as literally conjure another more beautiful reality into being. In the new jungle, the common cause of clandestine migration has brought disparate groups of people with differing religions, languages, and cultures together. The language of art in the form of painting, music, song, dance, and literature is universal. In the new jungle, the making and celebration of the creative appears to be an important and the latest phase in the formation of community. Embracing beauty in all its aesthetic forms facilitates the transgression of cultural boundaries and enables a temporary transcendence of life's everyday struggles. Mending walls, boundary maintenance, a commons critique, and the promise of a new mobile settled commons. He says, "Good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or what I was walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down." And this is Robert Frost, the poet, the American poet. Good fences make good neighbors. I'm sure that you are all familiar with this saying. What is probably less familiar is Frost's reinterpretation in his 1914 poem entitled Mending Wall. Rather than advocating building fences as a mechanism for the preservation of good neighborly relations or containing cows, Frost is in fact suggesting that walls should be dismantled. Quote, "Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down." End quote. From Hungary to France to Ceuta to Melilla, the building of fences in order to wall out clandestine migrants and wall in local citizens has been one of the most popular solutions to the European migration crisis. Fortress Europe's borders remain permeable for the transnational flow of capital, commodities, and information, but not people. Across the EU, clandestine immigration control remains at the epicenter of political and popular debate. The rallying cry from the right is contain the others already within and keep those others out. The racialized, gendered, generational, and political dimensions of clandestine land and sea protest movements force us to rethink what constitutes free will, agency, and victimization. The precarious nature of clandestine migrations of desperation demand that we address human rights concerns of protection, prevention, and freedom. In liminal spaces such as the new jungle, clandestine migrants without legal citizenship do find community and do create new commoning strategies. At the same time, as invisible strangers, they must live and labor in the shadows of informal and exploitative economies, where they are marked as racially different crimigrants, to borrow the term US uses to describe stratification, non-citizenship, and the interface of practices of surveillance and conditions of undocumented migration in the EU. Carceral and liminal spaces, such as the New Jungle, provide spatial arenas for the assertion of particular kinds of oppositional commoning strategies, including the occupation of space, the making of home, the building of community, and the production of new cultural forms. In closing, I propose that we reimagine the New Jungle in particular, and invisible cities in general, as factories for the manufacturing of a new commons that embraces both the mobile and the settled. As the late great Black feminist author and scholar Audre Lorde reminds us, quote, "It is out of chaos that new worlds are born," end quote. And thank you.
I wonder if we could have the lights up a little bit so that it's easier to see if anybody is raising their hand immediately with a question. And Laura is here with a microphone to go to you if you have a question. Yes, great. Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
I think I have a difficult question for you.
Okay, I like difficult questions.
So, after living 15 years in Thailand myself, I do find that there is a lot of commoning, as you say, consanguinal. It's probably not the right way to say it. So within the family, it's really the commoning is very extensive, and but I feel it doesn't really easily cross that boundary. So in other words, there is very much commoning inside a particular zone. But if you have a person dying just outside on the other side of the road, nobody looks out for them. So in that sense, I wonder if it's not too idealistic to assume that those kind of more closed commoning practices actually can easily extend when they travel with people that they're not familiar with. I may be wrong. I just would like to.
That's an interesting question. Yeah. No. What I was really trying to reference with that whole notion of consanguineal and conjugal was to get people to think about this notion of migrant pasts and migrants' cultures of origins, because I think there's a sort of very kind of essentialized, and monolithic and homogeneous way in which we talk about this migration crisis that isn't really differentiated, and there's a clear sense in which those who are migrating have pasts, and they have cultures, and they have histories, and they have families, and they have family obligations, and I think the desperation of migration, yes, does kind of force a sort of Darwinian survival of the fittest mentality, but there is still a sense of what I was trying to argue was that there is still a sense of a commoning strategy that is centered around the very condition of migration, of being in this, position of walking or being stuck in the case of those who are in camps, that does cultivate a particular kind of commoning strategy. It could obviously be unpacked and reworked in the sense that even in Calais, my understanding is that there's a lot of self-segregation that goes on. So the Eritreans all stay in one part of the camp, and the Afghanis in another, and the Syrians. But I'm also told that these spaces, these moments of celebration of art through music and song and dance, is an opportunity for a cathartic opportunity for those divisions and those factions and those boundaries to break down.
We're playing microphone tennis. I have another difficult question, which is something that's been worrying me for a while. As you say, in the industrialized, post-industrial countries, we're having to relearn this art of commoning. But one of the things that I've seen almost everywhere I've been is that increasing economic wealth leads to decreasing social capital. So even in cultures where you have very strong traditions of commoning, as people get richer, the commons starts to disappear. And one of the things that worries me is whether there is in fact a correlation between the alleviation of poverty and the destruction of common spaces.
Interesting.
And I wondered if you had any thoughts of that based on your research.
Yes. No, we were talking about that at lunch. Where is she? There you are. Yes, we were having a very interesting conversation about this in terms of what constitutes development and progress, and you know, that, as you say, that correlation between accumulation of wealth and modernity and a lack of connection to these older and more traditional. That's a very interesting question. Yeah, because I think there is actually a connection between and I'll use this as an opportunity to kind of talk about this notion of poverty, because I think this has been one of my frustrations in terms of the very limited criteria for what constitutes refugee status, and this polarization, and you know, kind of in kind of simplistic terms, you know, kind of make this distinction between the worthy refugee and the grasping economic migrant, and we're in a position now where, well, if you're Syrian, then you know we open our arms, please come in, and then if you're Eritrean or Libyan or Nigerian, I mean, you're here, you're migrating for better opportunity. And my argument is, why can we not see poverty is a form of persecution? You know, we have these very limited definitions of what persecution is, and why not see poverty as a form of persecution, you know, kind of compelling people to move? I mean, I think most people would want to stay within their communities and within their homes, but there are other more compelling, some outside of their power and control, that are compelling people to make that move, or those moves, really, you know, because we're looking at these cross-border migrations.
I've been trying to study the connection between possible connections between migrants and the commons, because the two topics have been of interest for my research in the past. But I've had some issues in doing that, and that's why I would like to ask the question, because on the one hand, I totally agree with what Michelle raised as an issue, and even worse, even though in the Global South, I totally agree with you that there are many contexts where the commons somehow are still protected and recognized. When we're talking about these migrants, in most of the cases, not talking about 100%, but probably like 70% of these people comes from cities, not from the rural areas. And the rural areas are the areas where the commons are really protected. I mean, if we're talking about natural resources, while the rural areas are exactly that areas, and that's where it's connected with the other question, where like social life is much more influenced by like Western standards, to make it simple. And what I see in Calais is definitely building a community, but it's not necessarily building commons, because this is a transitional phase where they necessarily have to build a community, because first of all, it's not everyone stays together. As you were saying, there is still a distinction between based on religion and origin. And then even when you manage to cross the borders that comes from your religion or your nationality, then it's because of an emergency situation where you really need to cooperate, because either you cooperate or you die. But then I think that what would be very much interesting, even though it's quite difficult, is to figure out how to, when this step is overcome, hopefully for these people, and they find a way to get into a situation which is not a transitional situation anymore, how they can get involved in building or claiming the commons within their new community. And then it's a matter of how building the commons can be a way for integration and cooperation. I'm aware of a very interesting example in Brussels where there has been a social house that has been built for refugees, supported by the municipality. And then refugees were from all over the world, and they had to stay together because it was decided by the municipality. And they decided to build an urban garden together, and it was a way to create connection within a community. But it's very tricky.
Well, I think we have, to put in a plug for the idea makers, I think we have 3 very innovative solutions to exactly what you're saying. Laura's the living room. The other Laura's, where are you? What do you? I forgot what you're calling the house. The common space, and then we have the fab. What do you? I'm sorry, because I've been looking at so many different boards. I'm forgetting your. What is your? Antonia, I remember your name, Antonia, but the name of your. The Fab Lab, yes, that's what it was. Yeah, that I think we have 3, very innovative ideas here of ways not only of kind of preserving and creating a settled commons for these migrants, but also kind of interfacing with older migrants and also locals or indigenous, for want of a better term, communities. So I think we have some very very important solutions. But I would also respond to this is and I guess it's the bias of my training as an anthropologist that we can't underestimate the kind of work that goes on in these liminal moments. That yes, they are not settled, and yes, this is a transitory state, but there are instances where individuals have been in detention facilities for 7 or 8 years in this kind of liminal space, and so I think we have to. I think yes, in the long term, kind of find these integration or assimilationist strategies, but also with the magnitude that we're dealing with now, to be mindful of the fact that there are going to be individuals who are not going to be settled and integrated for a long time, and are going to have to, kind of find these commoning strategies, to deal with this notion of being in between or being in this liminal status or space of waiting.